All right, let me just start off by saying that I recorded this entire video and realized that the mic was not actually on. So I am doing a voiceover on this. So if some things seem out of sync, that is the reason why. But right here I have a variety of books that I want to show you that you can use for your junk and art journal. It can be anything that you make, it can be something that you've purchased from someone, or just a regular old sketchbook or journal that you grab from a shop, even a notebook. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, but we're going to go ahead and take a look at a few of the different books and styles, including how they're bound and how the signatures are put in. And just a quick explanation, there's a cover and a signature. The signature basically is just the pages put in the book in groups because sometimes you need bigger ones. So here I'm just showing that this is an example of where you can get your paper for your signatures or a book that you can actually use. So like I said, something as simple as a little notebook you found. This was like that little pack that I just showed was like a 5-pack of a bunch of little 8x8 books. This one right here is a tall and skinny, or what I like to call a tall and skinny junk journal. Um, it's made up of papers that I got from an Etsy shop, the dyed ones, and the dragon ones and jewel ones are actually from my shop, that I made specifically for a tall and skinny book. It is bound by sewing in the signatures on that one. This one is what I like to call a standard size junk journal, um, but really there's no hard rules on how big a junk journal can be. This one just happens to be a good size because you can take typical either A4 or letter size paper, and just fold them in half, and they fit perfectly in this size of a journal, which is basically just an 8.5 by 11 on this one, cut in half for the cover. This one I think has a 2-inch spine, 1.5 or a 2-inch spine, and then these are just 8.5 by 11 papers. Again, ones that I've designed, the little ghost ones. The gray papers are from an Etsy shop, from a friend of mine, and those are put in there, along with a few of the gold pages, which are just scrapbook paper that I got from Michaels. This one is bound with elastic. I will be showing you how to do the elastic binding a little bit later in this video as well. And basically just showing you can decorate and cover. It doesn't have to be super fancy. You can use whatever you want, add pockets, do all kinds of different things. Um, just keep it simple if you need to, or make it as complicated as you want. This is a little mini size junk journal. I haven't 100% completely bound it yet. These papers are basically, again, more papers from an Etsy shop, a few other papers that I just had lying around, and some of these are, again, one of my designs of papers. I do a lot of them for my designs just because, I like them. They're cute. But it's a small sized one. I don't know the exact dimensions on this one, but again, you can make them whatever size you want, particularly if you have a lot of scraps, which this next book will show you a really good example of using true junk. A lot of this was made from envelopes and cardboard and folders, old folders, and it's called a flip-flop journal. You can go ahead and research that one. They're really, really fun because they flip and flop and open all kinds of different ways. This one used a whole lot of envelopes in this particular case and a few folders to make the entire thing. You can see right here like a long folder with a big window, papers put inside, decorated like crazy. And then I actually put a signature in the middle part of it using elastic, um, to hold together the signature that I do have in this book. You can put several different signatures in. You can put one or two. It doesn't really matter. In something like this, these are like old pages from a stamp catalog, um, music pages, dyed papers, doilies, old book pages, just a little bit of everything, true junk journal style. But again, there's no big hard fast rules. There's some like envelopes right here that I dyed and covered and stained and painted over, and I use like old fabric, or not fabric, some old pattern pages, and that I didn't have the instructions for anymore, or not all the pieces are there. Um, all kinds of different things, and just attached a bunch of lace and ribbons and made a cover with some fun stuff. So that's another version that you can do. And then I have a really bigger version. This is a full 8.5 by 11 size book with a slightly bigger, it's an 8.5 by 11 piece of chipboard to make the cover. And then I used another piece that was about 1 inch to make the spine. This one has 2 signatures in it. This one again is paper that I designed. I had a full 8.5 by 11 that I joined together with just another strip of paper because I don't have a printer that prints like 2 sheets at once. Um, and then more of the dyed paper from Etsy shop owner. I'll put a link in that paper if you want to get that. The shop isn't quite open yet. It's from a friend's shop that she closed it and is going to be reopening. This is a little mini junk journal in the big junk journal that I made. And I simply just folded out the cover to make it have a little bit of a bigger spine and then just sewed in the signatures again. These are pamphlet stitches. I typically just use a pamphlet stitch. There's all kinds of stitches. I won't get into fancy stitches, just the pamphlet one to make it easy. And then there's this one. This one's kind of my favorite for experimenting and doing things in. This is the one I actually use a lot to actually do my art and journaling in. This is a traveler's notebook sized art journal. And when I say traveler's notebook size, traveler's notebooks also have various sizes, but this particular one is made out of 8.5 by 8 inch paper and cardstock just folded in half. And I will be showing you how to actually make this particular book as well. And this one was made up of a lot of like experiment pages, old notebooks, old books, like I had like doubles of some books that I just used the pages from it, old magazine pages, how-to books that I had doubles of, um, some old textbook pages, some crossword puzzle pages, and just a little bit of everything. Again, some junk, some scrap journals, some scrap paper, leftover scrapbook papers, some more coloring cardstocks that I had. And I just made pockets and other things to be able to put things in. So this one's a really fun one too. Right here you can see these are like little Ernie Ball envelopes that are from my son's guitar strings. Every time he gets guitar strings, they come in like little cute envelopes like that. So I always save them. He saves them for me so I can put them in. And just more pockets and things made out of more scrapbook papers that are part of my designs. Some of these are just regular scrapbook papers, washi tapes, put on scrap papers to make pockets and things. It's really fun. There's all kinds of stuff in here that you can use. More Ernie Ball pockets and stuff like that. All right, so I'm going to put this aside. We're going to grab some materials. They're really simple. The only thing you're going to need is some cardstock for this particular book, and then whatever you want to use as the inside of your pages. And we'll go over some of those ideas too. All right, so I'm going to use this folder to make our cover, and in order to do that, I'm just going to cut it in half. I want to utilize the pocket that's in there, so I'm going to cut that down. The book I'm going to make is going to be 8.5. The cover size that I need to cut first is going to be 8.5 by 8 inches, and the cover itself is going to be 8 inches tall by 4.25 inches wide once I've cut it down and folded it. So you don't need any special equipment. You don't need to have this big old cutter. I just happen to have it. I love it. It's Caterpillar Pro. It's the old version, but they do still make them. So let's go ahead and cut this. We're going to cut it 8 inches because that's going to be the height. And the pocket itself is actually going to be on the side of the book, not on the bottom. So I'm doing it so it's 8 inches wide by 8.5 inches. Or 8 inches tall by 8.5 inches is what I end up cutting this at. And then I'm simply folding this guy in half. And I'm not really paying attention, like making sure it's like perfectly lined up. I just like to get a good crease in there, and it's pretty good. But as you can see, when we open it, the crease ended up on the edge of the pocket, which is going to make it a little hard to see. So we're going to go ahead and cut off and cut down on that pocket just to make it a little bit easier. All right, so I basically trimmed everything down. for that pocket. So now it has a good little pocket folded in half. And now again, it's 8 inches tall by 8.5 inches wide. And then when you fold it down, it's 4.25 inches wide. And that's going to be my cover. So the next thing we're going to do is get paper to put on the inside of the book. All right, I've got yourself, I just basically grabbed that book that I showed you earlier that can be used as an example to use as a cover or the book itself. But we're gonna go ahead and just take out this paper, and I'm gonna use the inside of this paper because it's about it's an 8 by 8 inch book, which is the perfect size for this junk journal. So I'm just gonna take the staple out, and then we're gonna cut the paper in half and then fold it in half so that we can get it to fit in our book. All right, so right here I'd already took out the staples real quick, so it was taking a while because I had no idea where my staple remover is. So again, you could always use this as a cover. It's perfect size, this little 8 by 8 book, and I believe it was like a 5 or 6 pack that I got from like Target or something like that. I don't remember honestly, of these really cool little 8 by 8 books. I think they're supposed to be storybooks for kids, for them to write their own small stories. But right here, I'm just gonna go ahead and cut this paper in half. I was gonna do it with scissors, but then I decided against that and just cut it with my paper cutter instead. And they're just under 8 inches each, which is perfect for this book again. All right, so once that's all nice and cut, you're just gonna fold those papers in half. And I do it kind of messy on this one. I usually try to be a little bit better, but yeah, this time it's just a mess. So I know it's gonna bother everyone that that's not all nice and lined up, but I was just trying to do it kind of quick. But you can see now I have a perfect size paper that goes in this traveler's notebook. So again, you're gonna cut your cover 8.5 by 8 so that it makes it 8 inches tall folding, and then you fold it in half, makes it 4.25 inches wide, and then you're gonna cut some 8 by 8 paper, which makes it perfect so that it doesn't stick out on the side and doesn't stick out on the top or the bottom. And then different ways to bind it. One really quick and easy way to bind it is simply popping a paper clip on it. Don't even have to hold it in there. This way you have access to all your paper. Um, you can take out like a full sheet and design on a full sheet, fold it back up, throw it back in. It's kind of more of a portfolio style. And you can do this really with any book, any size. You can make whatever page size you want. It doesn't have to be bound, doesn't have to be fancy. Um, so the next way I'm going to show you is with the stapler. Really simple. I'm going to show you my favorite stapler. It's actually called the Staple Board, and it's a pretty cool little staple because it's a magnetic stapler instead of using a long arm stapler, which you can get a long arm stapler and it reaches all the way through to the middle, and then you just staple it, staple it, staple it. But on this, I found the staple board. It's really cool. I found it at Michael's. You can get it on Amazon. I will link it in the supply list. But it's kind of cool because you can get 3 sizes of staplers. It comes with staples. They come in different colors. And it's magnetic, so you can just take each one of them off. There's a small, medium, and large with a little magnetic guide that helps hold everything in place. It even has a little drawer to hold your staples in, which is really cool. And the large staple is like industrial. It's really good for making books because it's like really thick. So it holds the book really, really nicely. All you do is simply just line up where you want to have everything. I will say clip the edges so your paper's not sliding around on you. I love these big paper clips. You can use like a binder clip or something, but the big paper clips always seem to work best for me. But then I just line it up right here to find where my middle is, and then I grab the little magnetic guide, put it right on top. There's little arrows on the magnetic guide, so if I have to adjust the paper, I just move it until the line that I want to staple on is between those little arrows, and then I simply just press. Now, I messed up a little bit because when I pressed it, I kind of slid a little bit off to the side, so it stapled it kind of wrong, but you get the idea of how the staple version works. You do 3 staples and that's it. You've connected your signatures. But I'm going to take this one out just so that I can show you how to actually sew your signature and how to add elastic to your signature instead. Well, actually, we'll do the elastic first and then sew it to complete it. But a really simple way is to use elastic cording, which is just a round version of elastic. It's like basically like a cord, and it's rounded, and you can get it in all kinds of sizes and colors. You don't want it too thin. The one that I'm holding, I can't tell you exactly like the thickness of this one, but you can kind of get an idea of how thick it is with seeing it here. It's completely round, nice and stretchy, and I'm simply just gonna pull it through around the edge and then just tie a knot, and that's it. This one's a really simple version. Later on, when we do the hardcover, I will show you a slightly different version of using the elastic. And I'm just simply pulling it through and just doing a really simple knot through, and just it holds it that way. And I can add as many signatures as I want. I can add more paper, you know, if I want to pull this in and out or reposition a paper. I didn't like something and I just need to get rid of it and add anything. It's really simple. This is one quick and easy way to have a signature in there, holds it there. You can always like put tape or like decorate the outside to kind of hold it in place just a little bit more if you really want it to. But I think this is like one of the simplest things to be able to do it. And then you can again use a clip to hold it closed, use another piece of elastic or ribbon to hold it closed, whichever you want. You can also add more elastics if you need to like make a bigger cover. You could always make a bigger cover, fold it a little bit more to make a thicker spine, and then just add it to another cover, and then add more books into one big book cover, as whatever you need to do. So I took it off just now so that we can go ahead and sew the signature instead. And again, I'm just going to show you a simple pamphlet stitch. There are all kinds of stitch versions. You can get really complicated, really fancy, and really pretty stitches if you really want to. There's different things you can use for stitching it. You can use what I'm showing here is a waxed thread. It's thicker than regular thread. You can use this. You can use baker's twine, ribbons, shoelaces, yarn, anything like that. Anything that you have that you can sew with. You just don't want to use really fine thread. Otherwise, it's just going to start ripping your pieces through. You can even sew on a sewing machine, but you do want to be careful. You want to make sure you use the largest stitch possible on a sewing machine. Um, Pretty good thick needle. Usually the ones that sew jeans are really good for this. And jean thread are really good for this when you're going to actually sew on a sewing machine. Um, that was a little hard to say, but yeah, if you're going to sew it on a sewing machine, make sure the thread is thicker, and the stitches as wide as possible. Otherwise, you can end up just creating a perforated effect where it's pulling apart like a ticket. So for this one, we're going to use wax thread. It's a little bit thicker. Um, this wax thread does come with my kit for on my tool if you want to use that. You can see that in the shop, but you can get it anywhere. And right now I'm not going to do any super measuring or anything. I'm going to do this really simply. I'm poking a hole in the middle, and then I'm poking about 1 inch from the top onto that to that folded area, and then 1 inch from the bottom on the folded area. And later I realized that I poked the hole wrong on the cover. I do suggest clipping your pages together again before you poke the holes. Otherwise, what's going to happen is what happened to me is that my hole, you'll see in a little bit that my paper slid, and when I put the needle through, I couldn't put the needle through because it poked on the wrong part of the notebook part, the cover part. But right now, basically when you start to sew, it doesn't matter what hole you start from, but just know that that's where you're going to end up ending. You see right there, I messed up the hole. So I'm going to re-poke the hole. But wherever you start, that's where you're going to end up tying it off. So if you want string to hang out so that you can add charms or anything like that, make sure you're starting from where you actually want to end up again, to tie off this. It doesn't matter what hole you go to next. Just know that you're going to go in one hole, whichever one you start at. You're going to go to any of the other holes up or down, and then back into the hole you started from, and just make sure everything's pulled nice and tight. And then you're going to go to the hole that you just haven't touched yet. So 3 steps: in one hole, out again through another hole, back in the hole that you started from, and then out to the last hole that you haven't touched yet, and then you just tie it off. So again, wherever you poke in first, that's where you're going to end up again. So we started in that middle, so that's where we ended up now to tie everything off. Yeah, I'm just repeating again, just in one hole, go into another hole, go back into the hole you started from, and then go to the last hole, and you're going to end up right back where you started from. Right, and then now we're just going to tie this into the knot, and then you can either tie it so that it lands at the very top or at the very bottom right here for this particular one. So that's it. I was just repeating again right here what I'm pointing out. In one hole, back out to the second hole, back into the same hole you started from, and then into the last hole that you haven't touched. And then you're just gonna knot it. I don't do any super special knots. I sometimes will like slip it under one side just to make it a little more secure. Wax thread, I can tell you, helps you to, or waxed thread or waxed twine, makes it a lot easier to tie these knots because it holds it in place for you without, having to worry about it sliding. Twine's usually really good. Yarn's usually pretty good unless it's a really slick one. But if you are using more of a shiny, silky twine or anything, it tends to slip while you're trying to tie it. And that's it. Made a pamphlet stitch and a signature and a cover. This one happens to have a little pocket, which is really cool. And then this is basically the same way you're going to do any stitch into any kind of a book, but next week I am going to show you how to make a book that has a hardcover on it instead. So that's where we're going to start now. For this one I did use pre-made or store-bought chipboard, but you can use cereal boxes or anything else to make it. It's fairly simple. For this one I did just use the pre-done chipboard. So this is basically the same book that we're going to make. It's really, really simple. This one has one signature, it has a 1-inch spine, and it has a 5.5 by 8.5 inch cover. But it's a little flip book. I made this just with papers that I designed. Yes, they're in my shop. Actually, they're not on my shop, sorry. These were exclusive to an event, which they may appear eventually in my shop. If they do, I will link it. But right now they're kind of exclusive for the event that may have brought you to this challenge. This one is bound together with just regular baker's twine that I did run through some wax though. And for a 1-inch spine, you can actually get 2 signatures on it, but this was like a quick example as well. So I did it kind of quick with just one signature on this particular one. And there's all kinds of ways that we can attach this. So let's go ahead and get started by making our cover, and then I will show you how to attach another way your spine, since you already know how to do the sewn version, which that's all this is, the same pamphlet stitch we just did. We'll go ahead and put our in with another elastic version. All right, so right now we're basically just getting 2 pieces of chipboard. This one happens to be pre-bought, but like I said, you can use another folder that's thicker. You just want it to be a fairly good thickness. This one happens to be a little thin, which I'm okay with that. This one I believe is only like a 20 something point, but I usually like to use between 30 and 50 point. You can go thicker, you can go thinner, that's up to you, but you want to keep it probably about a 30 and up. I just happen to be using a chipboard that I use all the time to package my papers. So it's going to be a little bit more flexible, but that's okay. You can always layer pieces together if you want to make them even thicker. So if all you have is cereal boxes, layer 2 cereal boxes together, and that's usually a pretty good weight. Chipboard. The chipboard that I'm using though happens to be about cereal box weight right now. All right, so we're just going to cut this up, and I'm simply, this works for either A4 or letter size being 8.5 by 11. I'm just going to cut this in half down to 8.5 by 5.5, which is basically just right in half. A lot of halves. Sorry, I don't know what I was explaining right there that took so long, but yeah, we're just gonna cut this down right in half. Right, and then with the second one, so again, 8.5 by 5.5. And the second piece that I have is just going to be to cut the spine, which I am just going to make an 8.5 by 1 inch spine on the next piece. All right, that took forever to cut, but sorry about that. But now we have all of our pieces that we're going to need, which is two parts of the cover, the front and the back, and then the spine. So again, 8.5 by 5.5 and 8.5 by 1 inch for the spine is what I have. And so now all we need is the paper or fabric that we're going to use to cut it, which basically you just need it to be about 1 inch bigger than the total size of what you cut. Um, is usually the perfect kind of midpoint. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, if you've seen my tool, I am not going to use my tool for this one, so that if someone doesn't have my tool, we're going to do it without it. I will tell you, I haven't done a cover without my tool in a very long time, um, because I know it's not going to look as consistent and nice as the one that I usually get out of using my tool. But if you want to get my tool, I will link it below. And when you go to see my tool, there's actually a video on how it works, and you can compare the difference of how long it takes me to do it with and without the tool. I'm used to doing it, so I'm usually pretty quick, but I will tell you with the tool, I'm definitely much faster. I don't have to guess anything. I don't have to measure it. I don't have to pull out my ruler or do anything like that. The only thing sometimes I use my ruler for is like just as a good edge guide, just to hold something still. But that's it. All right, so what I'm going to do is just take these two pieces of paper. You just need paper, fabric, whatever you happen to have. The only thing I wouldn't use is like wrapping paper. That's too thin. It tends to fall apart. Um, butcher paper is really good for this. Um, cardstock. This is a light, I think this is like a 65 pound or a little bit thinner than a 65 pound, like gold paper that I got from Michaels. I tried it out. I really like it. The only thing is it does get a little warped with glue. So I'm a little careful on how much glue and what kind of glue I use on it. Right now I'm just using art glitter glue, and I'm making just a line of glue that's going to be about a quarter to half an inch thick. I think I ended up going with half an inch on this, and I'm just going to glue the two pieces of paper together. So again, you just need something that's big enough that's going to be an inch border all the way around your chipboard pieces. So right here I am using the ruler on the bottom of my mat that you see, the glass mat, to try to line it all up. Um, Again, this is what my tool eliminates, having to do too much of that. Constantly pulling out a ruler. I have vision issues, so my tool was basically invented by my brother and I, to help with that, and it just made it a lot faster for me to get everything consistent on the cover. All right, so I'm just smoothing everything out here so that we can make that cover nice and easy. That this is my tool. The only part I am using it is just as a bone folder because I couldn't find my bone folder yet. But again, I'll show you. I'll have a link. You just go up and you can check it out. Oh, and the color you're seeing of the tool is a special edition color. Just know that you may not be able to get that color. There are plenty of other ones. So right now what I'm doing is I am just centering my spine over the seam that I glued, just so I can kind of cover it up. You can do this with or without my tool. because you can start my tool off different ways, but this is the version where you can actually just put it down on the seam, making sure that you have at least 1 inch on the top and the bottom, uh, and as straight as you possibly can get it. And I'm just going to smooth this out just to lay it nice and flat. Now with my tool, it basically already lays that foundation for you. So all you're doing is slipping things next to the tool and makes it perfect. What you want to make sure is you have enough of a gap between your spine and your covers so that your cover isn't too stiff when you're opening and closing it. But you also don't want it too far apart, because then you end up with a really loose book and it's like flopping all over the place, really funny. So I am actually going to use my ruler to try to line this up. Um, so I'm going to line it up the best I can. You can kind of see how it kept wiggling. Again, I have eye issues, so sometimes it's a little hard for me to read the ruler lines depending on the time of day, the kind of light, or how my eyes are doing that day. It's inconsistent for me when I see things. So I'm trying to line it all up, and I'm doing about 3/8 of an inch gap on this. Um, it seems to be a pretty good size for the thickness of what I've got, and for most common size chipboards that a lot of people use. 3/8 of an inch is about right. So I am just putting the glue all over this. Again, I believe I mentioned it, but it's art glitter glue, and this is just an old bottle that I had that I put my glue in. I'm just lining that up the best I can and just smoothing that out. All right, now we're going to just do the same thing with the second one, add glue all over it. Usually I like to spread this out a lot better. I usually use a little silicone brush to spread it out, give it a little more consistent layer, but just for the sake of time, I did this pretty quick. Again, about 3/8 of an inch away from the spine, and just smoothing that all out again. And I'll grab anything to smooth things out, but I will tell you, this is probably not the best tool to do it with, just because it's metal and it's really kind of sharp. I was really afraid that I was going to rip it, because this paper isn't the best when it comes to glue like that. It tends to warp a bit, and I almost ripped it. So again, like my tool would normally give you a 1 inch border all the way around by just putting it right there and just drawing a line or cutting along the edge of it. But in this case, I'm going to go ahead and wing it. And I am just, you can use a ruler and mark a 1 inch spine all the way around it, but I am just going to use my scissors and eyeball 1 inch. Um, Again, though, it's kind of funny, because as you're going to find out pretty soon, that I don't quite cut it correctly. And I get a couple of little oopsies, but nothing's too seriously this time. So now I'm just going to cut at an angle off on these corners. It's important not to cut too close and not too far. If you cut too far away from the corner, and you don't have a good gap between the corners, you end up with a really bulky corner, and sometimes it sticks out. If you don't have enough of a gap and you fold it, sometimes your corner of your chipboard sticks out and it doesn't end up being covered. And it doesn't look quite as neat. So yeah, and I could tell when I had cut it, I didn't quite cut it, but again, because sometimes I can't completely judge how far I am with the vision issue that I have. So sometimes I get it and it's good, and sometimes it's a little off. So right now I'm just folding down all the edges just to prep it and get it as nice and neat as possible. I can already see where some things are going to be a little funky because I didn't use my tool yet, but like I said, you don't need the tool. It just helps me go a lot faster, and it's a lot easier for me. So now I'm just going to go ahead and glue down my edges. Again, using the art glitter glue. You can use any white, fast drying craft glue. I suggest making sure it's a good archival glue that's acid free, or like so that it doesn't damage your papers. Or you can even use tape. Double-sided tape is what I usually use. Do not use duct tape. I highly suggest you don't use duct tape. Duct tape, if you've ever taken duct tape off of something and it's all gooey, and when you open it or try to repair a book with it and you take it off and it's all gooey, That's what's going to happen to your book eventually if you are using duct tape to hold your book together. Even if you put it under paper, under fabric, the oils from the tape can eventually leak through and they may show. I'm not saying that it absolutely will, um, but I have had books and things where I've used it or it dries and then it just falls off. So you do want to be careful about not using duct tape. You want to make sure that it's something that's archival that lasts a while. So right here you can see I'm just trying to smooth everything down. Um, and there is a book cover. Now, like I said, because I didn't use my tool, I can see a couple little spots. See how that's not quite perfectly matched up? They're all a little bit different on those corners. Like one of them did pretty well. And then also like the corners are kind of sticking out a little funny. Um, Usually when you use my tool, it's cut at an angle so that you get a good consistent corner every time. It's not too big of a deal. It's just weird for me because like now I'm so used to doing it quickly and easy to make it a good border all the way around that it was bugging me a little. And I'm not too big on making sure everything's perfect, but that one it was a little weird. So now we're just gonna cover this up. I'm just getting a piece of paper and I'm gonna put it right on there because it's pretty flexible. But it's up to you. Sometimes I will cover first just the spine with one strip of paper, and then other times, and two pieces of paper on each side of the cover. So like one on one cover, one on another cover, and then one for the spine. Usually you want to start with the spine first and then put the two other pieces or the spine after. It depends on the look you're trying to get. Right now I'm just adding the glue. Excuse me. Right now I'm just adding the glue directly onto the chipboard and laying that out and smoothing that out. And again, right here, I'm just explaining that sometimes I put a paper on one side, the other side, and the spine. And now that I got that down pretty well, now I'm gonna just burnish these. Excuse me. I'm just gonna burnish in where the spine meets the little gap so that way it lays better. And now I'm gonna add glue to the rest. All right, so I laid out all my glue and I flattened it all out. So now we're gonna go ahead and add our signatures. So you can do the same thing, poke your 3 holes and put your signature in. Basically, again, I was gonna wing it by just putting in the middle, and right now looking at the video, I can tell I'm about to poke the hole in the wrong place. Now that I'm looking a little further away, I can see that it's not in the middle, but usually about the middle, about 1 inch down from the top and about 1 inch down from the bottom. I do have an add-on for my tool that actually helps with this. It has a guide and holes and everything so that you can line them up all perfectly, particularly if you want to put more than one signature and you want to make sure all of the holes are consistent, all in a line. You could definitely use a centering ruler or anything like that to make sure that it all fits. But I am not going to do that. I'm just going to poke them and I can tell a little bit of the inconsistency. It looks fairly good. I did pretty good, but I can tell that middle one's not quite in the middle. But instead of doing this, right at the last minute, I thought, okay, forgot. I'm going to go ahead and show you how to put the elastic in since we already did the other book. You know how to sew it in already. So you could put 2 signatures usually fit pretty well on a 1-inch spine, about 8 to 12 pages. It just depends on how thick of a page you have. But what I'm going to do instead is show you by just poking some bigger holes using the Crop-A-Dile. You can also do this by like poking a hole with scissors and just kind of like spinning it until you get a good size hole to fit your elastic through it instead if you wanted to. So I'm going to poke 2 holes at the top about a 1/4 inch in and a 1/4 inch over. So you'll see what I'm talking about. Try to get a little bit closer on that. So I do apologize. I didn't realize I was so off from the camera. But it's basically a 1/4 inch from the top and a 1/4 inch in from the spine gap right there. You can see, and then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side and poke those in. So again, I apologize that I didn't show you directly on camera, but it's basically, it's just hole punching a 1/4 inch in and a 1/4 inch over from the spine and the gap. These ones lined up pretty good. The Crocodile does have these little teeth. I know I have the older original version, so my teeth I think stick out a little bit more, whereas the newer version I believe has like more of a tick mark with plastic, I think instead. Um, but I know there are tick marks so you can measure how far in and over um, that you're going. But again, quarter inch in, quarter inch over, and then we're just going to add the elastic through the holes. I'm going to use a piece of elastic that I had before, but basically you just want to make sure it's going to go through all 4 holes. So we're going to use one piece of elastic and put it through. I kind of got reminded of this way from Christy when we were doing our original retreat. Some of those videos, she does one that's similar. I did mine just a little bit different because I believe she used 2 pieces, where I'm going to use one on here. So we're going to basically go into the hole and then come back in, and then we're going to go back out again on the other side, and then come back in and tie it off. So it makes it pretty easy. So there you go. Back out, back in, and then just tie on the edges. And just like we did before, I'm using the same tie version that I did before. I just kind of wrap it around my fingers and pull it through. And then just try to get it as close to the board as you can to give it a little bit of a tightness, but not too much. And you should be good to go. And there you go. And now you can go ahead and add your signatures in there the same way we did before. A bunch of folded up pieces of paper. And now you have room for 2 signatures on this one book using the elastic, which makes it super duper easy. So like I can actually get this book and I can just put it directly in to the elastic that's already there, and you're perfect to go just like that. And you can add 2 of these. You can also, there's another method that you can do and add another piece of elastic to the other book and then add even another book on top of that if you wanted to. So it's pretty cool. All right, so now basically I'm just going to grab a bunch of papers. This size book is really good for 8.5 by 11s where you just trim off the borders, or basically trim it down to 8.5, sorry, 8 by 10.5 is about what will fit perfectly in this. You're basically cutting off a 1/2 inch off the length and the width of it, and then you can just attach your papers directly in there. And it could be anything. It could be those papers, envelopes, old mail, whatever. It doesn't have to be exactly that size. You saw from the flip-flop journal that I showed you that we had all kinds of different sizes of papers and envelopes and folders and all of that in here. And the good thing about this one is that you can adjust out your papers. So if you want it bigger, smaller, you want to add more things in, rearrange your papers, this is a really good way to do it. The more that you put in there, the tighter your elastic's going to get. So just be aware of that. Also the holes, just so you know, the more you're going to tug on them, the more possibility of the holes like ripping a little bit. You can also add grommets and things, which I showed you. You can actually see on the other book that I showed you with the elastic before. Grommets or eyelets, whatever you want to call them. One requires an extra piece, one doesn't, but they basically do the same thing. It's a metal piece that you pop in the hole to help reinforce it. But you can see right here, these are nice little journal pages now. You have 2 sets in here, and you can fit a whole lot with the elastic rather than sewing a lot of the times. Sewing, again, though, you can kind of judge which way you like the way it feels, but that's pretty much it. So you have your 2 books now that you can use, and there are links to all the supplies and stuff that we used. There's all kinds of different sizes of books you can use. Like I said, little guys, big ones. You can add, you know, laces and things now to your covers. You can cover it with all kinds of different pretty papers. Add charms to the edges, add ribbons, pockets, all of that. This particular book here is it's actually a mini journal or a mini album. This one's made with more hard, consistent pages. This particular book is a class that will be coming out later. If you got a pass, though, to the, I believe, yeah, so if you got a pass for the Autumn Muse retreat, you actually have that class free in there right now. If not, if you're grabbing this off of my site, you can go back and grab that same pass or get that later. All right, thanks. Bye.